It's the internet, you're busy, let's do this. I'm Jeff Grubb, I write for GamesBeat.com. Let's take a look at some webcams. I like doing this because I really like kind of keeping in touch with the tools that are out there for content creators, especially in the video game space. I think that there are a lot of interesting solutions right now involving, using a GoPro connected to a cam link, using a smartphone now. I did that for a while. Right now, however, I am the happiest with the Razer Kiyo Pro. That is this one right here that I'm using right here. It is it's a very good webcam. It's $200 still. It's pretty expensive for a webcam, but it also delivers really good results. I think it's right up there. It looks just as good as like almost a GoPro, but it looks as good as a smartphone camera in a lot of cases. And it's just got this big, nice sensor, a lot of features. I'm really happy with it. The one issue with it continues to be autofocus, something I tend not to use with webcams anyhow, but if it's something that you are worried about, Razer does have, it seems like they have an updated firmware to deal with the autofocus in the works, but they started rolling it out and then they stopped. And now if you try to get that firmware update, the website's down. So we're just going to assume that that continues to be an issue, and that if autofocus is something you really want, then you probably should keep that in mind with the Kiyo Pro and not try to rely on that too much. But the reason we're here is not just to talk about the Kiyo Pro, although it is my go-to right now. We got a couple other cameras. Let's bring them up. We got a couple of AVerMedia cameras. So AVerMedia sent over a couple more for me to look at. So we have the Kiyo Pro right here. Here is the AVerMedia 315 cam, and this is the AVerMedia Cam 513. Now, these are all pretty good webcams. They're all solid. I think they all look pretty good. I think the difference between the 513 and the 315, the 315 is supposed to be like a 1080p, really fast camera that can handle a lot of information really quickly, can handle low light situations pretty well. And the 513 is a 4K camera. Now, we're not going to test that right here. I will say that for the most part, if you need 4K, a webcam makes less sense to me. It just doesn't make a lot of sense if you're trying to make 4K content to go with a webcam. Maybe there are certain situations where you need to show a lot of people in a room sitting around a table or something like that, and you want to get some detail on all of them sitting pretty far away. Maybe that makes more sense. But for now, we're going to focus on content creators for video games, for live streaming, for YouTube. And anytime you have a camera that might get shrunk down into the corner of a screen for YouTube or for Twitch, you're not going to need 4K. You're not going to really need 1080p even at that point. But let's just kind of compare these cameras apples to apples right now. And I will say, just like off the bat, I've tuned all these, tried to get them all looking pretty good. We'll mess around with them a little bit here in a second, but I tried to get them all in pretty good shape to where I think I'm pretty happy if I were to like go live with how they look right now. And as has been like the usual, as has been the case since I got it, the Kiyo Pro required the least amount of fiddling. It got a really nice picture just with little effort, and that's one of the reasons I'm really happy with the Kiyo Pro. The 315 and 513 also didn't require a lot of effort. It was pretty easy to dial them in, adjusting the white balance, and really when things start going wrong on these cameras, it's very easy just to like find the right spot. It's not like there's not a lot of huge variance. When you're getting the right picture that you want, and both these cameras make it very simple. Now, I will say that in terms of detail, in terms of clarity, the Kiyo Pro still, I think, is on top. Let's just take a look at my hair as an example. Now, in the 315 and in the 513, it's pretty good. You see kind of each follicle, you could see some detail. You could see some of my white hairs over here. But it's just not quite as clear and crisp as it can be on the Kiyo Pro, where you could see a lot of detail. It is very clear, very crisp. The image just overall looks really nice. I think all of these cameras have that webcam look of like a little bit of graininess, a little bit of noise, but for the most part, again, these are all really solid images. Now, let's just take a closer look at each camera since we're here. So let's go back to the Kiyo Pro. Let's bring up the label so you can see it. This is the Kiyo Pro on its wide setting. You can like adjust that, and that is actually a physical lens moving inside there to give you different fields of view. It's not just like cropping, and it's actually using like a little bit of a fisheye lens in here to kind of bring me up close, so you can kind of you can almost see me warping as I'm getting up close to the camera. But I tend to use this camera not in this setting, but more in the middle one. Because again, I'm usually cropping myself. I have someone else on screen with me. And I kind of want it just to be, it doesn't need to show my entire room. You can see there's a mess over here and stuff like that. We don't need to get that. But this like the other cameras have a pretty wide field of view, and I think they do actually use like computerized cropping instead of actually adjusting their lens. And so to be fair, let's kind of keep it here. But yeah, this again, just a fantastic image. It looks really nice. I think it's very presentable. It's something that you can, again, you could dial it in really easily, but you can also plug it in, adjust maybe one or two things, maybe adjust, turn down the gain or turn up or down the exposure, depending on how much light is in your room, and just go from there. And I continue to love that about the Kiyo Pro. Let's check out the 315. And I think if we just we'll do that again. Ignore, I know the first thing that's going to jump out at everybody is the focal length. Don't look at don't focus on how I change in size. Just try to focus on image quality. So here we have the Kiyo Pro. Let's go to the 315. And I think this looks a little bit less clear, right? It looks a little bit grainier, a little bit lower quality. You can see that, here, let's see. You see the lights have a little bit more, lights over here have a little bit more definition. And then when we go to the 315, they look a little bit fuzzier. You kind of see what I mean? You could see like the label on my isopropyl alcohol looks a little kind of pretty crisp here. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not great. This is not a cinema quality camera. But if we go to 315, it's just a little bit fuzzier, right? Still a good camera. Still clearly a very solid webcam. And yet, I just think it's not quite matching up to the Kiyo Pro. But if I were to compare this, and I'm not going to bring in the Logitech, I think all three of these cameras better than anything Logitech has. The Brio gets close, but the Brio's just not. It doesn't really match any of these cameras, I don't think. That could be a personal preference thing though. But for me, AVerMedia and the Kiyo Pro are kind of in a league of their own here when it comes to USB webcams. But yeah, I think this looks great. And then if we go to the 513, I think this camera, it's mixed, right? There seems to be a little bit more clarity. Maybe the coloring's a little bit off. I had a little bit more difficulty getting the coloring right on this one, making it feel more natural. But we you know what? How about we go into the settings on these cameras, try to lock them in. Let's go back to the 3 camera setting here. And then I'll bring up the settings of each one and we'll see if we can't get this just right. Okay, so I know it's a lot of faces here, but mostly we're worried about this over here. We're trying to, we're going to adjust the 513, see if we can get it a little bit better, maybe get the coloring a little bit more correct. I will say that, you have a little bit finer control on the Kiyo Pro compared to some of these settings, like the sharpness here. It's on like a 6-point scale. Doesn't do too much. So again, it feels like it's hard to get these things right. The white balance here, I think, is going to be maybe the most important for us. Try it up. That's too blue. Bring it up. A little bit too orange. Try to get it just right. I think this is what I'm talking about to a certain extent, where it is just a tad more difficult to dial in these other cameras to feel right. Although I think this looks really good now. I think that looks really great. I think it's a little bit noisy. Maybe that's the gain. Turn down the gain. And just to kind of give you an idea of like the comparison here, the Kiyo Pro, one of the things it's known for is it's got a really huge sensor. And that means it doesn't need as much light as some of these other cameras. But the 513 here is at -3 already, and we could try turning that down. But if we turn that down to like -2, you can see that now we have a huge lag problem in terms of that shutter is opening for such a long time, and now I'm having this ghosting effect that looks really it makes me queasy. I really don't like this look. I try to do whatever I can to get rid of it. I think the 315 and the Kiyo Pro both are great at avoiding this problem specifically. it seems like the 513 is going to be in a situation where, you know, it's gonna have to deal with that a little bit more. Like I have a light on me right here, and we are at -3, and I have to have the gain turned up just to, like, if I turn down the gain, like it's way too dark, right? So we have to turn up the gain just to be able to see me, and then that's where we're gonna get some of that noise. And this is we're just making compromises here. We're making compromises because we want to be able to see me, but we don't want to have that ghosting, so we don't want to turn down the exposure. This is, you know, I think this is a fine image, but you could see we are already sort of on a cusp where we have to make some compromises. But let's go ahead and do the same thing for the 315. Okay, so now we're just in the 315 here in the middle. Just kind of see kind of what making adjustments actually looks like. I'll just show you right here quick, again, the sharpness setting. You know, I think I look a little bit fuzzy, right? But what happens if we turn up the sharpness? We go from 2 to 3, and it immediately goes bananas. It can't handle it. It's not okay with this. So we're gonna turn it back to 2. You can see, I mean, we can see what 1 looks like, and all of them above here have this issue. So we'll just turn it down to 2, and we're gonna have to have that soft look a little bit, and that's just the way this camera is gonna be. You can see the contrast has a similar thing where it's on, like, you know, a 10-point scale or something like that, maybe a 20-point scale. And that means it's, you know, it gets pretty aggressive pretty fast. But that's fine. I'm happy with the contrast here. I think, you know, maybe it's a little aggressive. But it's kind of how I like it. You can see that already though, like the exposure here, it's handling it a lot. The sensor is bigger. It's handling it better. We're at -5. That enables us to have a lower gain. And I think overall, you can see that there is less noise and less grain than on the 513. I think we could just we can eyeball that, right? And again, I'm really happy with that. We could kind of adjust it here a little bit, maybe go down to -6. And I think I might make it look, you can see now we're starting to get a little bit more grain, a little bit more noise, and that's kind of closer to what the 513 has to deal with. And we're turning it all the way up. The gain is all the way up here. Let's not do that. All right, I'm about to blow out your eyes here for a second. Yep, sorry about that. Let's turn it down. This is, you know, we can even turn the gain all the way down here, and this still looks pretty good. I'm gonna turn it up a little bit though. Yeah, cool. I don't know. I really like the 513 or the 315. I think this looks really good. I think the important thing here is what we talked about in terms of avoiding that ghosting, being able to handle a lot of light situations, and the bigger sensor in the 315 is very good at that. Not trying to do 4K when it doesn't need to do 4K. That helps with that as well. Let's, you know what, while we're here, let's go ahead and actually just turn off this light and see how the 315 and the 513 compare to the Kiyo Pro. I won't make any changes right away, but we'll take it from there. Yeah, I think all of these look pretty good. Yeah, all of them look pretty good. They handle it pretty well. But if we were to make adjustments, like, let's turn up the exposure here. Okay, you can see at -4, we're already starting to get some of that ghosting on the 315. So that's a bit of an issue. I think this is going to be less of a problem with the Kiyo Pro. Let's turn this back down. But you know what? We have a lot of gain to work with here. So let's bring up the gain. You can see that makes quite a bit of a difference on the 315. So then let's go ahead and do the same thing with the Kiyo Pro though. We're gonna hit configure video, bring it in here. There we go. Sorry about that. So we're at -6 with the Kiyo Pro. Turn down to -5. And we see there's a little bit more ghost in there. It's not quite how it was compared to the 315, but turn up the gain. And you can just see that we're getting a much brighter image. There is still that ghosting though, so let's go to -6 and instead bring up the gain. Yeah, there you go. See, it's just so much better at creating a brighter image in different light situations than other cameras. You know, the 513 is going to behave pretty similar to the 315, but you know, let's give it a shot. I'm hitting OK on the OBS window instead. All right, let's go to OK. Let's go to Sorry about that. Let's go to properties, configure video. Turn up the gain. Yeah, you can see like it just doesn't like it. Because we're turning up the gain, we're gonna get a lot more noise. And then, but if then we were to turn down the exposure, it's not much better. We could turn down the gain a little bit here now. We try to adjust the brightness and stuff like that, but it's just not going to be. It's just not going to be as good as the Kiyo Pro. That's just kind of how it's going to go. Now I kind of blew up my brightness a little bit here on the Kiyo Pro to the point where I think it probably doesn't look quite as good as it should. But the point was just to show that it can get brighter in dark lighting or darker lighting, and much brighter than the other cameras. And then you can still dial it back to however you like. Either way, let's kind of wrap this up. This video is going a little bit long. I didn't want to even go this long. The point is that these are all good cameras. Let's turn the light back on and we'll wrap it up. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. You get the idea. All these cameras are really good. All these cameras, they have a pretty good picture. I'm still partial to the Kiyo Pro, but I think that honestly, if you can find any of them, you're gonna be pretty happy. Between of the AVerMedia ones, I would go with the 315, unless you need 4K. But if you need 4K, you're really having a different conversation. I think you need to be looking at different solutions. Probably the CamLink 4K with a solid DSLR. Really, that's where your mind should be going. And then if you're doing 4K with sitting in front of a camera, yeah, you are having a different conversation. But for some reason you really want a 4K webcam, the 513 is solid. If 4K it would be a nice to have, I would say don't even worry about it. Go with one of the 1080p ones, and that would be the 315 or the Kiyo Pro. Both of these are really good in a lot of different light situations. The 315 clearly a little bit softer. Just it's just kind of how it goes. But overall, I like it. And maybe what you do, like maybe you prefer to like have this kind of camera that's like actually does have this further focal length. The Kiyo Pro, I'm on the wide lens right here, but even if you change its focal length, you're still going to kind of be the same size across all things because it's got that curved lens that really just is going to bring you closer. So maybe there's something you like there. Maybe you have a different preference. But overall, I'm very happy with all of these cameras. Yeah. So yeah, I guess real quick, let's go over like price and features, and then we'll wrap up. All right, now I got the light from my browser up here shining down and helping out a little bit. So the Kiyo Pro is $200. It has one of these nice little lenses you can put on there to block it when you're not using it. It uses USB Type C, and it needs a USB 3.0 connection. I think all of these do. But it uses Type C, but it's a disconnectable. You can take the cord off of the camera and replace it with a different cable if it comes to that. If this cable breaks, you could take it off, replace it with something else. You just got to make sure it's the right type of cable. Otherwise, it won't work. The 315, I believe you can get it for like $120. It's a pretty good deal. It's a pretty good camera for $120, honestly. Keep that. I think that's important to keep in mind. It's got this nice little. You won't be able to see it, but I can just flip this switch right over and it blocks it. It's really nice. It feels really good. The cable doesn't come off on this one though. If the cable breaks, something happens to it, if it bends in the wrong direction, you're just going to have to replace the camera. That's just kind of how it goes with it. When you're saving money, that's one of the things that happens. They don't put a port on the back. They just build a cable right in there. The 513 does have its own cable that can disconnect, and you can replace it. Again, uses Type C in the back and then connects with USB Type A to the computer. It also has a lens sheath here that just flips down. Doesn't feel quite as good, but it gets the job done all the same. And yeah, I think all these cameras, again, very good, very solid. And really they deliver on the thing that I think is important. They're pretty easy to set up, and they focus on speed, like they like shutter speed and being able to handle like a really fast, clean connection. There's not a lot of grain here. They're putting enough data through in order to like get a clean 1080p 30 frames per second signal, so you're not dealing with a lot of artifacts and stuff like that. And yeah, and that ghosting just isn't a problem when you have the right settings dialed in. So yeah, I recommend all of them, honestly. My preference is the Kiyo Pro. I think that's clear. But that's just in this sort of Pepsi challenge situation. I think it's pretty clear why. It has clarity, better clarity. I think it does a better job in more situations with how I want a camera to look. But all of these cameras, again, really good. Okay, that's gonna do it for me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time, until I have another camera and do one of these again. Take it easy, take care of yourself, have a good one, and goodbye.